Greetings everyone, I'm Sophis, and today I want to talk about the new Giant Kings update that came out for Age of Wonders. Both the free stuff and the DLC bring a lot to the table, and today I'm here to show a build that showcases most of what the update has to offer. I call this faction the Forgemasters of the Deeps. As always, the form itself doesn't matter, but we are starting with Underground Adaptation, Inner Fire, and Strong. The culture is industrious, and the society traits are Subterranean Society, one of the new traits that comes from the new Pantheon unlocks, and the Reclaimers. As you can see, this build is quite heavy on Materium, and the idea is to focus on the Giant King's ability to be the best creators of magical items. Today, the ruler we are going with is the Giant King, and more specifically a Fire Giant King. I made this Giant King a Ritualist, because the Giant King also has summons of its own, and the Ritualist class does boost summons. The result was a Mage Lord that attacked from behind its own troops that was capable of summoning many things. Since on the skill tree they do get their innate summon, they also get one through the runes of power that they can imbue into items, and through the Ritualist class itself. This results in being able to summon a variety of things that can help turn the tide of battle, and makes him a vital backline support. The tome setup is as follows. We start with the Tome of Pyromancy. The reason for that is a little bit of theming, of course. Since we are playing a fire giant, it makes sense that your race would be able to have fiery arrows and searing blades at their disposal. Ignite is of course a useful combat spell, and the way you will set up both your Giant King and your heroes, being able to set your enemies with the burning status will boost their damage output. Being able to summon a Lesser Magma Spirit will also help, because in the end we will boost all elemental units, so having one early on is also helpful. The Pyromancer is a valid backline alternative early on that you can substitute for the other options that you will have with the roster. After the Tome of Pyromancy we go to the Tome of Alchemy. From here what we really want is the Material Refinery that boosts knowledge and gold income based on magic materials within your city domain. This is because later on we will go into transmutation and we will get magic materials on demand. Since this is a forge build, it makes sense to have something that also benefits from what we will focus on for our strategy. The Afflictor isn't a bad unit to have in this composition. With the enchantments you'll get, you'll be dealing 3 out of 6 damage types, which can still be useful for triggering their Miasma Shot. However, they aren't the core of the strategy. They are just one of the many options of units that you can play around with. The rest of this tome is fairly optional, and you can decide to research things from other tomes and just move on. Then at tier 2 we get to the Tome of the Dungeon Depths, one of the new tomes that came with the DLC. Here we do want most of it, especially the special province improvements that we get from it. You will of course by default get the Dungeoneering Conclave, which will terraform your underground city into a dungeon, but you will also want the Silent Barracks, the Underground Vault, and the Clay Forge. The Clay Forge especially because it does provide you with 3 different units that can substitute your ratio units and provide a lot of tactical options for what you want to employ and play around with. The Underground Vault helps boost your production of Binding Essence and helps your forging, so it is also a fairly interesting special province improvement to have in your cities. The Silent Barracks may not seem like much, but with the update, very few things now add to fortification health to your cities, so a well-placed Silent Barracks can increase how defensible your city is. Raiders of the Deep is a decent enchantment, but with all the things that you will have as a race and with your society traits, make it not so necessary. It is a decent bonus to when you fight in the underground or when you fight above ground. Next we move to Tome of the Construct. This one ties together a lot of the things that we'll have going on for our race, because not only do we get constructs from Tome of the Dungeon Depths, we do have the Linked Minds transformation to synchronize your ratio units with constructs, making a better fit to have the army cooperate with itself. The bronze golem is a decent unit, but at least in my playthrough I haven't used it as much. It is a valid option of course, but you will have a lot of options as you will see after the tome section. The rest here are useful combat spells, but nothing all that special. The Worker Construct Nexus is also a very decent province improvement that will boost your production of whatever you might need in adjacent provinces. Then we get to Tier 3. At this point, you will want Tome of Transmutation. The reason for it is of course the Transmutation Circle. Since we are focusing on what we can forge, this is essential to try and get exactly the magic material you need, since availability is quite random on the world map. So being able to get whatever you need is much better, and of course complements what you already get from simple expansion of your city. Steel Skin is a very decent minor race transformation and adds a little more value to the tome. The rest are useful spells, and of course there's the Transmuter unit, which is a solid Battle Mage unit. It is slightly redundant considering what you get next. Then we finally get to Tome of Geomancy, the other new tome that came with the update. From here we want Geomantic Crystallization, a major race transformation that will make all of our ratio units into elementals. The Geomancer is also a unit that we get here, a Battle Mage, which more or less fills the same role as the Transmutator, and so you can pick and choose whichever one you prefer, but to be honest, Battle Mages aren't exactly the strongest units you can field in this faction composition. You also get access to Summon Elemental, being able to summon the Tier 3 version of whatever elemental depending on terrain. Since we will have a lot of lava territory, this tends to mean that we will get Fire Elementals most of all. Hall of Geomantic Resonance gives a small boost to your city by adding a bonus based on the terrain that the core of it is built on. Since we are underground, usually that will mean more production, which doesn't hurt at all given we are industrious. Resonant Blades is a simple but solid boost to your melee units, which are pretty much some of the strongest units that you'll be able to field in the setup. Moving on to Tier 4, we get to the Tome of the Crucible. With the update, there was a slight rework to how this tome works. More specifically, Meteor Projectiles now applies to both ranged units and Battle Mage and support units. This is very useful and adds to the value of this tome, which otherwise was fairly limited in what it offered as far as unit enchantments. And as far as I can tell, this is the first enchantment in the game that covers all kinds of ranged units all at once. Personally, I believe support units benefit the most for it since they have single shot attacks, and being able to hit in an area adds a little more value to doing that action. The rest of what's in this tome isn't exactly essential, so feel free to research older tomes or even more basic technologies to get through this tome faster. They are still useful spells, it's just that they are not necessary for this build. They simply add a little more to your repertoire of tactical options. The useful thing that the Great Foundry adds is the ability to summon magma spirits from cities, so you don't have to spend mana trying to summon it, although you still can with the Summon Elemental spell. This simply makes it more practical if you want to make an army out of them. Next up, since we mostly have Materium in this build, is Tome of the Golden Realm. The economic boost that this tome provides is its main utility in this build, especially for Reagent Refinery, because like Tome of Alchemy, it has a structure that works best the more magical materials you have in your domain. And since we will have plenty thanks to transmutation, this will always be a bonus that you'll get. Bazaar of Wonders is a good gold boost. Luxury Markets works perfectly as it would in any Materium-based build, since it does help you build your cities faster thanks to the Buy Now option being able to be triggered twice. The rest is up to you, such as Gold Touch or the Gold Golem, but you will have plenty of things to work with without needing any of this, same as the Tome of the Crucible. We finally get to the Tome of the Creator. Now, this tome did get some changes from the update. For instance, those of you who were thinking that changing the whole race to elementals was going to give Undying to all of them thanks to the enchantment that Tome of the Creator used to have, well, it was changed, and I think with good measure, because otherwise this would be a combination more powerful than even undead builds as far as having an immortal army goes. Instead, you do get natural regeneration, plus 10 hit points, and lightning resistance, which is fair enough, and is a useful bonus to have all across your armies. Naturally, the other things in this tome are fairly powerful. Tectonic Shatter is still a very strong spell, able to stun in an area. Call the Titan of the Earth is still a very powerful summon, and Create Earth Shatter Engines actually becomes one of the few spells in the Siege rework that reduces fortification. Now speaking of units, the strongest unit you will have available with everything that we have in this build is the Bastion, of course. The Bastion is already a very strong defensive unit for the Industrious Culture, but with all the bonuses that it gets, it does become a very solid frontline that is very hard to overcome. You will notice that despite me not including White Wolf mounts in this build, I do have them on my Bastions. And this is due to the new update bringing shops into the fold. There is a shop that may spawn that sells you mounts, and some of them are mount contracts that are randomized and can alter your whole race with the contract. I was fortunate enough to have White Wolf mounts, which did add quite a bit of power to the Bastions. You should be able to pull this off even without the mounts. It's just another option that we now have thanks to the changes to the game. And I didn't mind showcasing it because I do think that even though it is more powerful now as a mounted unit, I do believe the build stands on its own without the mount. And of course, you will be able to do this in your own campaign, perhaps not with this mount but others, depending on what's available to you. A reason the Gold Golem is optional is that since you are a Fire Giant ruler, you will get Fire Giants eventually as something that you can recruit in your city. It is more readily available, although it is slightly weaker than the Gold Golem. All the same, I do believe it is a very good unit, and if you want a centerpiece to your army, this one fills a role. However, I also believe in the power of all the ratio bonuses and benefits that unfortunately most mythic units do not get. Your elementals will of course benefit from things that you give to your race based on their class, and of course given the bonus that you get from Tome of the Creator. They aren't as stacked with buffs as your ratio units, but they are still very good. There's no reason to not include them in your composition. After all, they will work well with the rest of the army. The only thing is that they lack linked mines, which is something your ratio units will have to work nicely with constructs. Speaking of constructs, you will have the Clay Arbalest, as well as 2 other construct units at your disposal thanks to the Tome of the Dungeon Depths. The Clay Arbalest in particular feels like an upgrade to the Arbalest that industrial cultures get, due to their tier 3 ranking as well as a few abilities that they have. For instance, it is undying, and so at least once per battle it can come back to life and keep dealing damage, which makes it very useful even if it doesn't get all the benefits that a ratio unit might get. The Clay Defender gets the same enchantments your Bastions get, and same as the Arbalest, has undying. So if you want a frontline with this kind of ability, you can get it through this. It also gets the benefit of the Shaper's Touch enchantment. Therefore I would put it ranked more or less about the same as the Bastion. I do prefer the Bastion due to the racial abilities and it being a form unit. The point of this entire faction build isn't to just have the optimal units and have a very narrow composition. The point is having tactical options, of which you have plenty. As I've said before, you will get some early game mileage out of your Pyromancers, since they do get some benefits, but I do think they become outranked by the Magma Elementals once you can get them on a steady basis. If you do get the Mount contract, you will have them being more mobile units. So for army compositions with just cavalry, you may want to go for Pyromancers instead of the Magma Elementals. The Afflictor is also a valid unit for you to play around with in the early game. They do provide a little bit of disruption with Afflicting Miasma, and if you do combine them with other sources of elemental damage, such as the White Wolf mounts, you will have other sources of elemental damage to stack alongside what you already inflict. Another point, of course, is your ruler. As you can see, thanks to all the forged benefits, I am equipped with very powerful items. Not every slot is filled with tier 4 items, but thanks to the Fire Giant bonuses, a few of them are quite powerful. Because as some of you know, there was a rework to the item forge, and now you have separate resources that are used for forging. You have Binding Essence for most uses, and then you have Binding Fragments for more powerful items. Thanks to our Giant Ruler, we do have 6 infusion points to play around with. The limitation is of course time, taking 4 turns to prepare these items, as well as costing Binding Fragments, which are much harder to come by Therefore, you should save those for only the most important items in your composition, such as the weapon for your ruler and heroes, as well as some other pieces which provide you with special abilities and defenses. As you can see, the heroes also have powerful items thanks to this, being able to boost them by quite a lot compared to the usual items. Effectively, you will have very powerful heroes with custom-made items, as well as a very varied roster of units to pick from and choose which you want to deploy on the battlefield and adapt your strategies accordingly. The ruler of your faction is a powerful summoner and backline supporter, being able to bring down a lot of damage and pain onto your enemies. And so I believe this build plays about with the best that this update has to offer, giving you things to do with the new tomes, giving you powerful buffs to your heroes and the rework of the item forge, as well as a varied roster for you to choose whichever one you prefer to play around with. It is a very materium heavy build, so you will build up your cities quite quickly and make them the beating heart of your empire, backing you with a powerful economy and being able to produce troops at an industrial rate. And that's what I have for you today, a fairly straightforward build that I hope you play around and enjoy yourselves with. So that's all for now, and I hope to see you in the next one.